Hey everybody, welcome to the Whole Whale Podcast, where we learn from leaders about new ideas and digital strategies to make a difference in the social impact world. My name is Kariesha Martinez, one of the digital advertising whalers here at Whole Whale and your host for today's show. Thanks for listening. I'm really excited about today's episode. Today on the pod, we have Liz Eddy, co-founder and CEO of Lantern, which is a step-by-step guide to life before and after a death. Elizabeth is also a board member of Experience Camps, which provides camps for grieving children. Thanks, Elizabeth, for coming on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think this will be a really important conversation. So let's just dive right in.
Right.
Can you talk about Lantern, its mission, and why it's important?
Absolutely. So our big vision for Lantern is to be the one brand, the one location that you know, where you can find all the tools, resources, services that you need for end of life and death planning. So that might mean that you're planning for the future in your life to make sure all of your affairs are in order for your loved ones, or it might be that you're in sort of a heat of the moment situation of losing someone and needing to navigate those logistics that follow.
Yeah, I was able to take a look at the site. I did a little bit of homework before our episode, and it has really great resources. My mom is always like trying to prepare me for when she dies, and it's always like conversations in the air, you know, like, oh, I want this, I want that. But I think what Lantern really provides are those concrete steps on actions on what you should be doing.
That's amazing that your mom does that. I always encourage people, I'm like, the best thing you can do is make it a normal conversation, because I found so often when people start doing end of life planning, it's the first time they've ever brought it up with their kids or their spouse, and it's so awkward. if you're able to just have it always be a topic, then it isn't weird when it's brought up. My mom always did that for me as well. My dad passed away when I was young, so mortality has always been just very sort of front of our story as a family. But my mom has always said, like, oh, you know, I want this music played at my funeral, or I want it to be here, or I like these flowers or whatever. And it's made it less uncomfortable to discuss, and maybe part of why I'm so comfortable running a business like this.
Yeah, totally agree. I do agree. Like the first couple times I was like, can you not? But they're really important conversations. And I think especially with COVID being around and police brutality really being at a high, death is really at the forefront of everybody's minds, right?
Yeah. And I always like to remind people too that pre-planning doesn't inherently make you die. I think people have this weird like superstition about it, that it's like, if I talk about it, then it's going to happen.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? Like, no need to worry there. So do you think COVID has changed the way that people approach death and grieving, both in people's personal lives, like just death being on the news so often and, you know, everywhere we go, and even in professional lives for those who have lost somebody, and trying to navigate both this pandemic and also grieving?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it has brought mortality to the forefront of everyone's minds. There are certainly some people who are very much already in touch with their own mortality, but I would venture to say the vast majority, it's not something that's really often thought about, or if it is, it's very quickly pushed out of your mind. And I think this scenario has made people realize that it's something that needs to be addressed. It's something that needs to be prepared for. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we're tagged in articles and stories of people in the hospital, in the ICU with COVID, and the message is the same over and over again. It's, have your advanced care directives, have your pre-plans in order. There was a comedian a few months ago who made a video from the ICU that said, you do not want to have to do your end of life planning from a hospital bed. Like, figure it out in advance so you know exactly what needs to be done, and you don't have to add this added level of stress on your friends or your family members. So I think, there is, of course, this recognition of our own mortality. But then on the flip side, I think it's also, through COVID and through the Black Lives Matter movement, it's also made people really start to see and understand that death and dying is not equal. And it's not, a good death is not afforded to everybody. And I think it's so important for our industry and as individuals to recognize that this vision of what dying well means, right? Like having dying in your 90s and having your family members around you, and like sort of this vision that you have of like what a good death is, whatever that might be, that it's not afforded to everybody. And what can we do as a company, as an industry, as a society to address that?
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you kind of bring up like what dying well means. I feel like often people talk about, I plan on dying, in my sleep when I'm like 100 years old. And most times it doesn't really happen like that. And really preparing and planning for that as well, which I think I really love about Lantern. It really kind of solidifies it in a way that doesn't make it feel too sad, or which it is, but really taking those concrete steps.
Yeah, and I think if you especially if you are planning your end of life as a healthy, vibrant young person, it's almost less scary because it doesn't feel as imminent, it doesn't feel as real, and you can think about things in a more open way. Like we actually see a lot of young people who find it like meditative, find it peaceful, an opportunity for reflection of like, what's important to you? What do you really want? How do you want to be remembered? And there's a lot of studies about mortality and how if you feel a deeper connection to your own mortality and a recognition for it, can actually make you a much happier person, because you are aware of the finite time that you have. So you spend your time better, you love harder. You spend time with people you want to spend time with. It can be really powerful.
Oh, that's really interesting. I think even in that same vein, again, we're in a pandemic that's really unprecedented in a lot of ways. And we're trying to move on with life the best that we can, going to work, trying to live as normally as possible. How do you think employers and employees can support each other when it comes to someone who has lost somebody important to them?
Yeah, well, from the employer side, I hope I'm starting to see that employers are realizing good bereavement policies, good bereavement benefits, and support around end of life and death for their employees is critical. It should be a non-optional benefit. I mean, we already have life insurance, which is basically death insurance at most jobs at this point. And the fact that we haven't taken that same care and consideration for the logistics and the bereavement and the things that take a ton of time and energy and emotional distress, and employers don't really put any hand on that. If a company even has a bereavement policy, it's typically way too short. The average is about 3 days. Which you can imagine if you lose someone close to you, 3 days, you're not even, as a friend of mine said, she's like, 3 days after my husband died, I didn't even like want to tie my shoes, let alone, go back to work.
Yeah.
And so, I think there's a lot of room for growth there. From the employer side, one, just having a really strong bereavement policy. We really encourage companies to actually draw a minimum for their bereavement time, but not a maximum. So to actually put a floor, right? Because you can imagine if an individual, there's no time frame. Like a lot of employers will say, oh, we don't want to put a time on bereavement. Like we'll let the employees and managers figure out how much time the person needs. And in theory, that's a wonderful, beautiful thing. But in practice, what ends up happening is people feel uncomfortable asking for more time. They don't know what they're allowed to take. They end up looking at the national standard of 3 days and saying, well, I guess that's roughly what I should be taking.
Yeah.
And then also, it does put in place the possibility that some people might get more time and be afforded more, while others might be looked down upon for taking more. And those kind of biases happen really easily if you don't have any kind of groundwork laid out. So we really do encourage, put a floor, say, for us, we say 3 weeks generally. And we say it's 3 weeks for what we call a quote, immediate family member as defined by the individual. So that doesn't necessarily mean mom, dad, spouse, child. If your immediate family member is your aunt, is your best friend that you live with, is whatever, like that's up to the person. And to trust your employees that they're not going to take advantage of a policy like this. They're going to do what they need to do. And if you've hired them, you should trust that they're going to handle it the right way. And then, also just making sure you have your managers, well trained to be able to have these kind of conversations, to properly support your employees that are going through this, to take care of themselves as they're navigating this process, and to feel safe that they can be vulnerable and open about the experience they're going through.
Yeah, I definitely identify with that first part. I had a relative who passed away earlier in the year, and there wasn't any push for me to go back to work anytime soon. There was definitely no pressure, like you said, but I kind of felt a little bit of guilt, taking time off, being away for a couple of days, to the point where I was updating Slack every day, hey, everybody, I'll take another day. I'll be back soon. I'll take another day. I'll be back soon.
You don't know. Yeah. You don't know what is okay and what's yeah, exactly. We hear that all the time. And it's, it's based on good intentions, but having some guidelines, especially, if you say, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, however long it is, it also gives that person permission to not reach out for a week or two and just say, okay, I know I at least have this. And,
Yeah, I definitely think having that floor level is really important. One, not only to make employees feel a little more comfortable, but also having that time to unplug and kind of really have that time to grieve, right? It can be kind of hard to grieve when you're updating Slack every other day, saying, oh, I'll be back soon, or checking in every once in a while. So having that policy, I think, is really great too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm also wondering if you have any ideas on maybe bereavement training for employees and employers. What do you think are the best ways to communicate with someone who may have lost somebody without being overbearing in a way where I'm sure that a lot of people who've lost somebody can feel overwhelmed with, how are you feeling? How are you doing? How are things? But while also showing care.
So we actually provide a webinar for employers and for managers to be able to learn just the ways to have really empathetic and supportive conversations, and creating a inclusive environment around grief. And I think one of the most important things is setting that space up before it's needed. And of course, that's not always a possibility, but I really encourage employers to do the research, to do our webinar or someone else's webinar, to train your employees before you're in a crisis or a situation where somebody hasn't handled it well. Partially because, of course, you always want to offer every employee a really supportive, safe environment. But you also want to create that space where people feel comfortable coming forward. I can't tell you how many times I've had employers say to me, oh, well, we haven't really had a situation like that happen. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you have 20,000 employees. If you think that no one is grieving ever, let alone they're likely many right now in this moment, then you haven't created an environment where people feel safe to come forward. They're just not telling you. But then on the flip side, being an employee who's grieving and going back to work, there are a couple of things that I always really try to encourage people to do. I mean, one is to make sure you ask for what you need, partially because you deserve it and you should take the time that you need and get the support that you need. But also, if you don't, you're going to build resentment towards your company. And it happens so often. You go back too early and then you're frustrated by your job, by your team, by your manager, because you're there too soon. And so making sure you really are understanding what you need from that time. And it might be, okay, can I work from home, 2 days a week, or, the pre-COVID, or whatever it might be, to just sort of ease back into the process. And I found, for the most part, managers tend to be, and employers tend to be, very flexible when you do ask for things, particularly around the loss. The second I always tell people is to have an escape plan. I know that sounds silly, and this is true at work, and this is true in your personal life. Before you're going somewhere, going into the office, going to a holiday party, whatever it is, prepare yourself in advance for, okay, if I start to feel upset and I need to get out, how am I going to do it? What do I need to do? Is there a room I can go to? Is there a stairwell that I know there's not a lot of foot traffic? Is there a walk that I really like? Can I can I make sure that the friend I drove to this, company holiday party with, that they're going to leave with me whenever I'm ready to go, and they already know that. Because you might not need it, but I think it's very comforting to know, okay, I have a plan if I need the space. And then lastly, it's just like knowing who you can talk to and lean on. And ideally in an office place, your manager, your teammates have already made that clear to you. But if they haven't, identifying, is there someone in the office where you feel really comfortable going up to them and saying, hey, can we walk and get a coffee, or can I Zoom with you, or whatever the situation might be. Or is it somebody that's out of the office that can help, to comfort in those situations?
Yeah, I think those are all like really great ideas that I'd never even thought of. When an employee is grieving, you always want to ease them back into the workplace, right? But it can kind of seem like easing back into the workplace is almost impossible when there's so much work to be done. Things pile up, team members need you. But I really love that idea of just maybe coming back for a couple days a week, maybe 2 or 3 to start, and then inching forward day by day, really, is really great practice.
Yeah. And also you're like, as a manager, I think you have a responsibility to really learn what the needs are of the employee. Because I found, people are vastly different in how they navigate grief. And there are some people who, for X amount of time, just they can't even think about work. It's just there isn't the space for it, and it's not an optional, right? It's not like you're going through this process and you're like, oh, I'm not going to think about it. When you're grieving, you have no brain space for it. It's just it's not available. And then there are some people who they just want to go back to work as soon as possible. They're like, I want to just try to get back into my routine. I want to try to feel whatever normal was again. It's a part of your coping mechanism. There's a lot of different reasons why. I'm one of those people. Like I seek out how, like, distraction and I'm not saying it's the right thing. There are certainly, I'm sure there will be some grief therapists out there that hear me say that and they're like, oh, we need to talk about why you do that. But it's the reality. We all have different coping mechanisms, whether they're good or bad. And some people really, they want to come back to work maybe more quickly than they should. And so as a manager, your job is really to understand how the person is coping, what makes them feel supported and safe. Is it that they really want to come back to work and continue to move through their grief in that way? And is that the right thing for them? Or, do they need more time? Because you also don't want to force someone to say, like, no, you cannot come back if they feel ready. So
definitely on the opposite end of the spectrum there.
Yeah, exactly.
And I also love that second point that you made about escape routes, which I think can be applied to a lot of aspects of life, not just grieving, but it kind of seems like working from home, being in the same space where you rest is also the same place that you work. Escape can kind of seem not always an option. Do you have any advice on different ways that people can grieve, escape, while also being in the same space that they might be working from and be stressed in?
Yeah. It's really challenging. I mean, the COVID era for grief and loss has added a whole new layer of complications, especially around distance from people that make you feel loved and supported, right? Like that's the biggest thing we hear from our users and from people also in my personal life that have lost someone recently is the normal things you would lean on, like, for example, going through old photos with your family members to look at a lost loved one and talk about memories. Like, you don't have that same kind of access and support. Even like feeling a hug from a parent, you don't have that kind of support. But I think in terms of, being in the same space and really creating space for yourself, I think there's so many different things. Ritual is so important. It means something different to a lot of different people. Some of the things that I've heard recently have been, taking a moment at the beginning or the end of the day to turn everything off, to sit next to the window, looking outside and light a candle and just reflect. It can be that simple. It's really about creating space for it. One of the things that I've started doing, truly just started right when COVID began, but I think it's really powerful, is starting and ending your day just briefly writing. So I write 3 things in the morning that I'm looking forward to and about the day. And then at the end of the day, it's 3 things that you're grateful for from that day. And it just really sets like a nice tone and energy. And again, it's something, really accessible to do and can create kind of a different space in your environment.
Yeah, I love that. And like you said, there are so many different ways that you can try to rest up a little bit in the space that you're working in. Even if it might not seem like a very big thing, like writing 3 things down, it could really make all the difference.
Yeah.
I'm also wondering about employees, not so much on the employer side, but kind of creating that community in an office space where if one of your colleagues is grieving, how do you think are the best ways that an employee can support their colleague without, again, being overbearing in any way?
Yeah. I mean, I think, first and foremost, like, as empathetic, compassionate humans, we all want to be, I say all, I'm putting us all together in here. We all want to be the first to jump and help someone and support someone. And I do encourage people to think like, am I the right person to be saying, hey, do you want to talk? Do you want to go for a walk? Do you want to whatever? Because not every single person within an office is the right person for that individual to be leaning on. And they'll be able to choose and feel out, who it is. They probably already know well who it is that they want to open up to. So, not taking offense if the person doesn't want to talk to you about it. And like, that's okay. There are a lot of other ways to show support for that person where it might be, saying, hey, if you're having a rough day or you need extra help with X project, like, I'm happy to help support you on that. Or, leaving a nice note on their desk, or, like, there are little things you can do without, feeling like you have to be deeply involved in their situation, because they probably don't want you to be. If you are that person, you are the person that they want to lean on and to talk to and to be supported by. A couple of things in the workplace that I always try to remind people is, one, like, if you're gonna go up to them and ask them, how they're feeling or whatever it is, like, try to do it in a private space. If you're in the middle of an open office space and you say, hey, how are you feeling today? And they're feeling awful. You don't want to be the one tearing up in the middle of your office. And I especially know, like, I mean, I know I'm this way. If I start crying in public, I then get embarrassed and then I cry more.
A never-ending cycle.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're like, I cannot believe I'm crying in the middle of my office.
Yeah.
You don't want to put someone in that situation. So saying, like, hey, can we chat for a minute? Let's go for a walk, or let's go wherever. And then say, I just want to see how you were doing.
Yeah.
You can also do things like, making sure if you're going to offer to help someone, be really specific about what it is that you're offering. Asking someone, hey, can I help you with anything, or can I do anything for you, then puts the onus on that person to come up with something.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And also to not know how much to ask for, and then you usually end up just saying, oh no, I'm good, I don't need anything. But instead, saying, hey, I'm going to come over on Sunday and mow your lawn, or I know, you're shuffling kids back and forth to daycare. How about I come by, every morning this week and do the walkover, or whatever, whatever your situation might be. Or it could be something as simple as, I'm going to send you takeout dinner next Tuesday. So just put that on your calendar, just to be very direct and specific about what it is that you're offering.
Yeah. Yeah, those are amazing. And I'm really glad that you called out really that self-reflection and self-evaluation on whether or not you're the right person to be doing maybe something a little extra, taking that extra step and trying to provide support. Because ideally, we would all be that person that could, provide that community, that support for an employee that's grieving. But the reality is that's not usually the case.
Yeah, exactly. And also, when you are the person who's grieving, especially if you're surrounded by a larger community, there's a lot of people asking, are you okay? What do you need? How are you doing? And it can get really overwhelming. Yeah. And so just having, I recommend too, if it's someone that you're not that close to, but you want to show support, as I said, like put a Post-it note on their desk that just says thinking of you with your name. It could be as simple as that, to just say, hey, I'm here. I'm probably not the person you want to talk to, but I'm here, and I acknowledge what you're going through, and I'm sending my support your way.
Yeah, definitely. I'm also wondering about Lantern and how Lantern has kind of opened your eyes to maybe a larger community of those who are grieving.
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit there. Can you say that one more time?
Yeah, I'm wondering how Lantern has opened up your ideas and thoughts on a larger community who is grieving. Anything that you've learned there that you think could help other people?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, there's a lot more people grieving and who have lost than we realize in our day-to-day lives. And when you open up about this kind of thing, you almost always will find somebody else who can relate. I think that's a really powerful thing. I know, I mean, just from working in the space, and also from, having lost my dad as a kid, and that's a part of my story, and it's something I'm very open about sharing. I almost always find in a group somebody say, oh, my mom passed away when I was young, or actually, my partner was diagnosed, with cancer a few years ago, or, you suddenly start to have this connection that you didn't realize you had. And it could be, and I find it with, 14-year-olds and 95-year-olds and everything in between, of realizing that you have this shared experience, even if the relationship and the loss could be vastly different. You have suddenly this deeper understanding of each other. And so I really encourage people, if they feel comfortable and they feel safe to do so, to be open about what you've been through, and you find new community every day that way. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for providing so many gems on something that a lot of people don't like to talk about.
Yeah. I actually had somebody else in the industry say to me the other day, who was like, we're in the business of discomfort. Like, we're constantly facing people who are really uncomfortable with what we do, and trying really to not just educate, but also just normalize these kind of conversations. Because I think society would be very different if we, not only pre-plan from obviously a logistical perspective and a financial perspective, but also by acknowledging mortality. As I said before, you live your life very differently when you do that. And you can imagine collectively how different the world would be if we recognized how finite time is, and how precious relationships are, and all of those really important things.
Yeah, the work you're doing is so important. Like I said in the beginning, my mom is always talking about what to do when she dies. And she's always like, there's a folder downstairs in the basement, make sure you check it out. And I'm like, Mom, if and when you pass away, I'm not going to be thinking about a folder.
But go, Mom, because a lot of people don't have that folder, and then it's a whole bunch of question marks. So well done.
Yeah. And for those who don't have the folder, it's good to know that Lantern is around to be that folder in a way.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we are. We're basically the replacement for the binder in the hall closet, which was my grandmother's example.
Yeah. But we're not done yet. We're moving on to my favorite part of every podcast, which is the rapid fire round. The rapid fire round, I think, gives our guests a chance to have a little more fun and talk about some things that we may not have touched in the main interview portion. So I'll ask you about 10 or so questions, and usually have about 30 seconds or so to answer, but no pressure there.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Cool. What's one tech tool or website that you or your organization has started using in the last year?
I started using Todoist, and I love it. I was a big notebook checklist writer, and my co-founder was like, I'm sorry, are you writing down your daily to-do list in your notebook? and introduced me to Todoist, which is, it's so simple. It's basically just a digital checklist, but it has that crisp feeling of ticking something off that just makes you feel really good.
Yeah, I feel that. We use Asana, and to mark something as complete fills me with joy. What's coming in the next year that has you most excited?
We're launching a whole new user experience in September.
Oh.
I am really, really excited about it. I think it's pushing the boundaries in a lot of ways of how we think about end of life planning. And there's a few features coming through the end of 2021 the end of 2020. What year am I in? Into 2021. Nobody knows. That are really, I think, going to get people thinking about what it means to end of life plan in a new way.
Yeah, that's exciting stuff. I'll make sure to mark my calendar for that.
In 2022, apparently.
Time is not real these days.
No.
Can you talk about a mistake you made early in your career that shapes the way you do things now?
Yeah. This is more of an emotional thing than like an actual tactical thing. But I was told early in my career that I was too nice and that I would struggle as a leader to be taken seriously because of it. And at a young age, hearing that, I really struggled to figure out how to A, be myself, B, be a good person, and C, try to follow this guidance of I need to be tougher. I'm not going to get taken advantage of. And honestly, what I learned from that is that it's not something that I would ever want to do. And what I really try to encourage people when you get this kind of advice, and I think it happens a lot in business, is you have to be tough, you have to be fierce, you have to, don't let anyone step on you to get where you need to go. And I really realized, I was there is no excuse in business or otherwise to not be kind to people. And honestly, the business world does not need more nasty leaders. There is more than enough out there. And so, I think the best leaders and the leaders that are coming forward and will continue to grow and succeed and thrive and lead strong businesses are the ones that are not just authentic to themselves, because if authentic to you is being not nice, then don't do that. But authentic to you and being kind and bringing your positive personality forward.
Yeah, and I would bet $1 that a lot of women hear that these days, especially women in business who are told that they're too nice to be taken seriously. And is it because we're too nice or because we're women? Is a really important question. Do you think NGOs can successfully go out of business?
I mean, first off, if you solve the problem you set out to solve, then well done. That's great. Congratulations. I'm kind of going to answer this question a little bit of a strange way, but I think it's less going out of business and more should you continue going? Or is there another effort that's doing the job in a different way that's working, that's accelerating? I'm a really big believer that you shouldn't duplicate businesses if it's better to join forces, right? And to partner. I would highly recommend doing that instead. And so that would be successful going out of business, other than obviously solving the problem you set out to, would be recognizing, there's another organization that's really nailing this. And why don't we combine our forces, focus that foundation funding and grants into one location and really accelerate this process. You see that in startup world too. It's why is there 5,000 different productivity tools being developed? And I think sometimes, a lot of times it's ego related. It's wanting to be the founder and the person to start it. And and if you can work together to do it, I think it makes a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. When you have Asana, Todoist, Monday, there are a lot of things that could join forces. Let's just say you had a hot tub time machine that would take you back to the beginning of your work. What advice would you give yourself?
Being a good employee does not equate to the hours spent at your desk. I felt like I needed to always be available and on and working. And I remember someone, he wasn't my manager, but he was a manager within the organization I started my career. And he said, he was like, if you're staying after work late every day, like you're doing something wrong. Like, are you being inefficient? Are you like, are we, allocating things in an inappropriate way? Like something is wrong if you're here all the time until 9 p.m.
Yeah.
And that really shifted my way of thinking of like, you're not going to be a good employee. You're not going to be a good friend. You're not going to be a good partner. You're not going to be a good at anything if you're working all the time.
Yeah. And I think that's especially true now that we're working from home. It's so easy to like wake up 3 hours before you start work and just start working just cause,
Yeah.
What's something you think you or your organization should stop doing?
Not taking vacation. That is, I've been really on my team recently because I think especially with COVID, it sort of felt weird to take vacation time. And it was almost a joke for a little bit. We would be in every week in our staff meeting, we say if we're going to be out at any point during the next week. And we kept joking, being like, well, where are we going to go? No, I'm not taking vacation. And now it's, July. And I was saying to everyone, I was like, okay, we can't joke about this. Like everyone needs to take vacation, even if it just means that you aren't checking Slack and email for a week and you're at home, fine, like do what you need to do, but like everyone needs a break and some space from work.
Yeah, mental vacations are key.
Yeah.
Let's also say you had a Harry Potter wand for the industry. What would it do?
I think, as we were talking about, dying well earlier, I would want to turn everyone's attention and leadership in the industry to really thinking about exploring and contributing to this massive problem with a lot of people not being able to die well, and really exploring how each of us and what our roles are to make a positive impact on that problem.
Yeah. And what's your favorite question to ask an organization or board member?
What's keeping you up at night? It's my favorite question for people to ask me too, because it gives you permission to be honest about what you're afraid of, what you're stressed about, why you're anxious.
Yeah, I love that. It's a very honest question. Like, what is keeping me up?
Yeah.
How did you get started in the social impact space?
I totally stumbled into it. I started my first nonprofit when I was 15 and had absolutely no idea I was starting anything. It was just my two best friends from growing up, who I'm still very close with. We recognized that our peers really didn't know anything about dating abuse and domestic violence, and it affects 1 in 3 young people. And so we developed an organization and sort of a curriculum of sorts to educate our peers in a fun and memorable way. And it just started spreading to universities and high schools all around the US. And so we kind of went from like, oh, we did this one project to suddenly we run an organization and we have all these chapters. And but truly it made me realize that I don't think I could ever work in anything that wasn't mission driven.
Yeah. That's amazing. What's a piece of advice your parents gave that you did or did not follow?
Stay in your job with good health insurance.
Did you follow it or did you not?
I did not follow it.
Okay.
When I was starting Lantern, my beloved stepdad was like, I don't understand. You have such good benefits at your job. Why are you leaving? I think a lot of parents tend to feel that way if their kid says they're going to do a startup. It's like, are you sure you want that instability in your life?
Yeah, a lot of guests have said that they did not follow that advice. So you're not alone there. And my last question, and probably my favorite question, is what advice would you give college grads looking to enter the social impact sector?
I would give this advice to anyone entering any sector, and that's that someone doesn't have to lose for you to win. I think it is so important when you are starting your career to recognize that you don't have to step on people to get where you need to go, and that you should elevate each other's work and support each other. It's only going to get you further. Yeah,
I love that, because it can feel like crabs in a barrel sometimes.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, that concludes my rapid fire round. Thank you so much. That was so much fun. So where can people find you?
You can find us on Follow Lantern. It is at Follow Lantern on social media. And then lantern.co is our website.
Awesome. Yeah, guys, you should really check it out. I did a little homework this time, and they have a lot of really great resources, some that I didn't even think about, like how to close a Verizon bill.
Yeah, it's funny that you brought that up. Is Verizon bill truly haunted me for months after my grandmother passed away. I could not figure out what account it was associated to. I was getting a debt collector was coming after me trying to close this account, but every time I would call Verizon, they couldn't find it. And it was just, it was a mess. So I love that you brought up closing a Verizon account, because I'm like, I just got chills when you said that.
Yeah. Debt collectors are no joke.
No, they're persistent.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Elizabeth. This has been a blast.
Thank you so much.